Have you ever walked into a room filled with your own family and still felt invisible? It's a quiet kind of pain, one that so many older adults carry but rarely talk about. You've spent decades giving, supporting, showing up with love and loyalty, but now it feels like no one really sees you anymore. The greetings are rushed, the conversations are shallow, you're there physically present, but emotionally, you feel left out. Maybe you still visit every week. You bring food, help clean up, play with the grandkids. You smile, nod, ask questions. But deep down, something feels off. You wonder, do I even matter here anymore? If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. And you are not wrong for feeling this way. In today's episode of Ageless Mind and Body, we're diving deep into the painful reality of feeling forgotten by the very people you once held closest, and what it means to choose peace, dignity, and self-respect when connection fades. This might just be the most important conversation we've had yet. There comes a point in life when you realize that constantly giving without receiving in return slowly drains your spirit. You give your time, your energy, your care sometimes without anyone even asking because it's in your nature. You show up again and again thinking that your loyalty and consistency will eventually be appreciated. But over time, something shifts. The thank yous become less frequent. The conversations feel shallow. The warmth begins to fade. And the saddest part, you still keep giving, still hoping it will matter, that someone will notice, that the connection will deepen again. But when you're always available, always the first to call, always the one to remember birthdays, to check in, to offer help, your presence can begin to feel invisible. What once was a generous heart becomes, in the eyes of others, a given. No longer a gift, just an expectation. People start to take you for granted, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. They assume you'll always be there, so they stop putting in the effort, and you feel it deeply. A slow erosion of your emotional reserves, like pouring water into a well that's never refilled. You become tired, not just physically, but emotionally exhausted. You start to wonder if maybe you've expected too much. But the truth is, you've only ever wanted something basic, to be seen, to be valued, to be cared for in return. Giving is beautiful. But giving endlessly without being met halfway becomes a form of self-neglect. It teaches others that your needs don't matter, that you'll keep showing up no matter how little they show up for you. Over time, it chips away at your self-worth, leaving behind quiet questions. Am I asking for too much? Do I matter? Will they ever notice when I stop trying? The answer is this: your needs are not too much. Your desire to be appreciated is not selfish. And your value isn't measured by how much you do for others. It's measured by how deeply you care, how much love you give, but also by how well you protect your own energy. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to pause, to pull back, and to honor yourself the way you've honored everyone else for so long. Creating distance is not selfish. It is an act of self-love. Stepping back from relationships that no longer honor or respect you isn't about anger, resentment, or cutting ties out of spite. It's a conscious, compassionate decision to protect your peace and reclaim your dignity. So often we're taught to endure, to hold on, to keep showing up, even when we're being overlooked, unheard, or taken for granted. Especially within families or long-standing relationships, we feel guilt for even thinking about pulling away. We convince ourselves that loyalty means staying even when staying slowly wears us down. But the truth is, staying in spaces that no longer nourish your soul out of obligation, fear, or habit can quietly break you. It sends a message to yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your worth is somehow tied to how much you can tolerate. That is not love. Real connection is built on mutual respect, care, and presence. When those are missing, it is not wrong to choose distance. In fact, it's courageous. It means you've stopped shrinking yourself to fit into places where you no longer belong. It means you've stopped begging for the bare minimum and started asking more of yourself. and for yourself. Distance doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply about your own well-being. It means you're finally ready to stop pouring energy into relationships that only drain you and start nurturing the quiet, sacred relationship you have with yourself. In that space, away from noise and neglect, you begin to heal. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to remember that your voice matters, that your presence should feel like a gift, not a burden. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to live from a place of self-worth, not just self-sacrifice. So if you find yourself needing space, take it. If you feel a pull to protect your peace, listen. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. And that in itself is a profound act of love. There is a quiet, powerful truth that often goes unnoticed. Sometimes your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. When you stop calling, stop visiting, stop filling the silence with effort and care, the people around you are left to face the space you once filled. And in that space, in the stillness, the unanswered phone calls, the unspoken invitations, they are forced to notice what has changed. Or they aren't. And that in itself is the answer you've been searching for. When you are always the one who shows up, always the one who remembers birthdays, who checks in, who keeps conversations alive, your presence can become expected, not appreciated. You become a fixture, reliable, steady, ever-giving. And that consistency, though beautiful and generous, can be taken for granted. But when you step back, when you stop giving out of habit and start choosing yourself, you allow reality to surface. Those who truly value you will notice. They will feel the shift. They will miss your warmth, your energy, your presence, and they will reach out, not out of guilt, but out of genuine care. But those who do not notice, who continue on as if you were never there, reveal something essential. They never truly saw you in the first place. That realization can be painful, yes, but it is also liberating, because it sets you free from the illusion that your worth depends on someone else's attention. You begin to understand that love without effort is not love, that relationships built only on your energy are not balanced, and that presence should be mutual, not just yours alone. Your absence then becomes a boundary, a quiet, dignified message that says, I will no longer pour myself into spaces that do not hold me with care. And as you stand in that silence, you start to hear something else, your own voice, the one that's been asking all along. What about me? What do I need? You deserve to be seen, not just when you're doing something for someone, but simply because you exist. So if your absence goes unnoticed, let that truth settle gently in your heart. You were not truly valued there. And that knowledge, though it may sting, is the beginning of your healing. Your value does not lie in being needed, it lies in being respected. So many of us grow up believing that our worth is tied to how useful we are, how much we can offer, how well we can keep everyone around us happy. We become experts at anticipating needs giving without being asked, and showing up even when we're tired or hurting. But at some point, a quiet truth begins to surface. Constantly doing more does not guarantee love, and being needed is not the same as being cherished. Real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself. It doesn't demand that you sacrifice your peace just to maintain a connection. It's not built on convenience, obligation, or habit. True love, deep, lasting, respectful love, comes from intention. It comes from someone choosing to see you, to listen to you, to honor your presence, even when you're not giving or fixing or helping. You should not have to earn love by working harder, by staying silent, or by pretending that your feelings don't matter. When someone only shows affection when you're doing something for them that isn't love, it's dependence. And dependence disguised as care will eventually drain you. If you have to constantly prove your worth, walk on eggshells, or carry the emotional weight of every relationship, it's time to ask yourself, is this love, or is it just a role I've grown used to playing? You are not here to be tolerated. You are not here to be the backup plan, the default comfort, or the one who always bends. You are here to be respected, to be seen, and to be loved for who you are, not for what you do. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop measuring your importance by how much others need you. Instead, you begin to reclaim your time, your space, your voice. You begin to understand that you are enough not because of what you give, but because of who you are. Let go of the need to please. Let go of the fear that setting boundaries means losing connection. The people who truly love you will adjust. They will rise to meet you where you are. And those who don't, they were only ever drawn to your giving, not to you. Accepting indifference slowly erodes your spirit over time. The more you show up where warmth no longer exists, the more you begin to trade pieces of your self-worth just to hold on to a connection that's already fractured. You tell yourself it's loyalty, patience, or unconditional love, but in reality, it's a quiet form of self-abandonment. You sit in rooms where your presence no longer lights up faces. You speak, but your words are barely heard. You try to help, to comfort, to remain relevant, but deep down, you feel invisible. And yet, you keep going back, hoping that if you give just a little more, maybe this time they'll notice. Maybe this time they'll care. But what you don't realize is that every time you silence your own pain to preserve a bond built on routine rather than love, you slowly disappear from your own life. The ache becomes familiar, the disappointment expected. You learn to accept the coldness, to explain away the distance, to lower your expectations so you won't be hurt again. But you still are, every single time. Because love without acknowledgement isn't love. Presence without connection is just habit. And staying in spaces that no longer nourish you is not strength, it's survival, at the cost of your soul. You begin to question your worth, wondering if you're too much, too emotional, or too sensitive. But you're none of those things. You're human. You want to feel seen. You want to feel chosen. And when that doesn't happen, it's not a flaw in you. It's a reflection of where you've placed your energy for too long. Choosing to stay in emotional deserts, waiting for love to bloom again, won't make the soil fertile. It only leaves you more parched. At some point, you must realize that protecting your peace matters more than preserving an illusion. You have every right to step back, to stop chasing, to stop pouring your heart into places that no longer open to receive it. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally understand that love, real love, should never require you to disappear. Let that be the turning point. The moment you stop showing up where your absence is easier than your presence. Because your worth is not defined by how long you endure. It's revealed by when you finally choose yourself. There comes a moment in life when you realize that living for yourself is not selfish. It's essential. After years, sometimes decades of putting others first, sacrificing your own needs for the sake of harmony, family, or tradition, there comes a quiet awakening. You begin to feel the weight of all the times you stayed silent to keep the peace, all the times you showed up, even when your spirit was tired, all the times you accepted less than you deserved just to avoid being seen as difficult or ungrateful. But something shifts. The longing for peace becomes louder than the fear of disappointing others. And in that shift, you discover something powerful. You have the right to choose your own well-being over relationships that leave you feeling unseen, unheard, or unappreciated. Choosing yourself is not a failure. It's not a rejection of love or connection. It's a declaration that your life matters too, that your emotions, your energy, your time are just as valuable as anyone else's. Too often, especially as we age, we're taught to be endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly giving. But without balance, that kind of love becomes a slow erasure of the self. You deserve more than to simply be tolerated. You deserve to be respected, celebrated, and nurtured, not just by others, but by yourself. Prioritizing your peace doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring about yourself just as much as you've cared for everyone else. It means learning to say no without guilt, to step back without apology, to spend time in solitude without feeling lonely. It's not about cutting people off. It's about no longer staying in spaces that chip away at your worth. That decision may confuse others. It may even upset them. But you weren't born to live your life constantly proving your value to people who only see your worth when they need something. Living for yourself means waking up with intention, finding joy in the quiet, and remembering who you are beyond your roles and responsibilities. It's a return to your core, a place of strength, wisdom, and inner calm. This isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. And once you begin to live this way, everything changes, not because others have changed, but because you finally have. You don't need everyone to understand why you're stepping back. Your decision to walk away doesn't require a loud goodbye, a dramatic explanation, or anyone's approval. It only needs to feel right to you. That quiet knowing in your heart that you've reached your limit, that your peace matters more than pleasing others, is enough. Sometimes closure doesn't come from others. It comes from within, when you finally say to yourself, "I've done enough. I've given enough. I've waited long enough." You don't have to justify your boundaries or explain your absence to people who never truly valued your presence. Choosing to stop showing up where you are not respected is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's reclaiming your time, your energy, your dignity. You can walk away gently, without bitterness, without shouting, without needing to be understood. Because the truth is, some people will never understand. They'll continue to see your silence as coldness, your distance as pride, your boundaries as rejection. But none of that matters. What matters is that you finally chose yourself. What matters is that you no longer sacrifice your well-being to keep a seat at someone else's table. You stopped knocking on a door that only opened out of obligation. You stopped shrinking to fit into places that never saw your worth. That quiet, grounded decision to leave, to rest, to heal is powerful. And no, it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. It makes you whole. You're not required to stay where your soul feels tired. You're not bound to relationships that drain you just because they're long-standing or tied by blood. What you owe more than anything is loyalty to your own heart. You deserve to feel safe in your own life. You deserve to feel loved without having to chase it. So if you've made the choice to step away, let it be a moment of grace, not guilt. Let it be the beginning of something softer, stronger, more true. You don't need their understanding to move forward. You just need your own permission. And once you give that to yourself, everything begins to change. The love you gave, the care you offered, the time and energy you poured into others, it all mattered. Even if it wasn't returned the way you hoped, even if it went unacknowledged or unreciprocated. What you gave came from a place of truth, and that means it still holds value. Your efforts were not wasted, and your heart was not wrong for trying. You showed up with kindness, with patience, with a genuine desire to connect and support. That speaks volumes about who you are. But now it's time to shift that same love inward. It's time to take all that care and compassion you so freely gave to others and offer it to yourself. Because you too deserve to be nurtured. You too deserve to be healed. For too long, you may have believed that giving endlessly was a measure of strength, that sacrificing your own needs made you noble, and in many ways, it did. But love that only flows outward without ever being returned leaves you depleted. And somewhere along the way, you may have forgotten that your well-being matters just as much as anyone else's. It's not selfish to care for yourself. It's essential. The same tenderness you showed others through late-night phone calls, quiet sacrifices, small gestures that no one noticed, you deserve to receive that too. From yourself. Healing begins when you recognize that your love never needed to be earned by someone else to have worth. It already had meaning simply because it was real. But now it's time for a new chapter. One where you no longer chase after validation. One where you stop waiting for someone else to return what you gave. This time, you give to yourself. You become your own safe place, your own steady presence. And in doing so, you begin to feel whole again, not because someone finally saw your worth, but because you remembered it on your own. Your past efforts weren't meaningless. They were a reflection of your generous spirit, but now let that generosity come home to you. You are worthy of the same love, attention, and care that you gave so freely. Let this be the moment you begin to receive it. Reconnecting with yourself is the first step toward true healing. It's not the silence of solitude that wounds us most. It's the feeling of being unseen, unheard, and unimportant, even when we're surrounded by others. There's a kind of loneliness that creeps in when you're sitting next to people who barely acknowledge you, when your words fall flat, when your presence feels more like a background detail than something cherished. That is a far heavier loneliness than simply being alone. But in solitude, especially when it's chosen, not forced, there is a quiet kind of power. You begin to hear the soft voice inside you again, the one that used to be drowned out by the noise of trying to please everyone else. That voice has always been there, waiting patiently beneath the layers of expectation, guilt, and obligation. When you stop chasing validation, when you pause long enough to breathe without performing something, inside you shifts. You remember who you were before you felt the need to be everything for everyone. You remember what peace feels like when it isn't dependent on someone else's approval. This is the beauty of reconnecting with yourself. You learn to trust your instincts again. You start to recognize your own needs, desires, and limits, not because someone told you, but because you finally listened. It's not selfish to turn inward. It's not wrong to enjoy your own company. In fact, it might be the most loving thing you've done in years. When you spend time alone, not to escape others, but to return to yourself, you create space for healing. You begin to understand that your worth was never tied to how much you could offer or how quietly you could endure being overlooked. Being with yourself fully present and undistracted brings clarity. You see which parts of you have been neglected, which dreams have been put on hold, which boundaries have been crossed too many times. And in that awareness, healing begins. You realize you don't need to be constantly surrounded to feel whole. You don't need to be constantly needed to feel valuable. Sometimes the path to peace starts with walking away from the noise and back into your own heart. Because when you reconnect with yourself, you return to the one person who has always been there, and that reconnection can change everything. Letting go of the hope that others will change is often the first step toward transforming your own life. For so long you may have waited for a message that never came, for a simple thank you that was never spoken, for an apology that was always just out of reach. You held on to the idea that maybe one day they would finally understand the impact of their actions, recognize your worth, or meet you with the same care and effort you've so willingly given. But in waiting, your life slowly started to revolve around someone else's timeline, someone else's growth, someone else's awareness, and that quiet waiting became a cage. There comes a moment when you realize that you don't need closure to move forward. You don't need their change to begin your own. You don't need their validation to claim your peace. That's when something powerful happens. You stop looking outward and start turning inward. You stop hoping they'll see you and begin truly seeing yourself. You begin to understand that your freedom does not depend on someone else's realization. It begins the moment you decide to live your life fully without conditions. Living fully means you no longer pause your joy, waiting for someone else to catch up. It means you stop rewriting your worth based on how others treat you. It means releasing the fantasy of who they might become and embracing the reality of who you are becoming. You start to fill your days with things that bring you meaning, not as a distraction, but as a declaration that you are no longer defined by someone else's silence. You don't need an apology to heal. You don't need a grand gesture to feel whole. All you need is your own permission to live freely, to feel deeply, to move forward without bitterness. That shift from waiting to living is the beginning of everything. It's the moment you stop giving your power away and reclaim it for yourself. You are no longer hoping they'll change. You are choosing to grow. And in doing so, you finally step into a life that's not dependent on anyone else. It's your life, whole, unpaused, and fully yours. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the truest, deepest version of yourself. The one who has always been there, waiting patiently, beneath the roles, the responsibilities, and the quiet sacrifices. You are no longer just a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own life, and the new chapter begins when you choose yourself not out of pride, but out of respect and gratitude for all that you've endured, all that you've given, and all that you still are. Choosing yourself is not an act of separation. It's a return to wholeness. It's saying, I matter not because someone else says so, but because you finally believe it yourself. Every day is a chance to write something new, something honest, something beautiful. And it all begins with one brave decision to live in alignment with your worth. If this message speaks to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Join us on this journey of self-discovery, healing, and quiet strength. You're not alone, and what comes next can be the most meaningful chapter of all. Let's write it together.